new versus old. What should it be? Now that is the question. I've had the great privilege of owning two very, very different vehicles. One very, very new, one quite old, 31 years old to be exact. And I thought it would be quite interesting to share my experiences and the differences between the two in terms of what we get today compared to what we used to get, and how it compares to now in terms of many different factors such as cost, reliability, availability, and whatnot. So let's get straight into it. So now let's take a look at what you get in a newer vehicle compared to a much older vehicle. Ford are very heavily boast a lot of technology in their vehicles, especially with the Ford Ranger. This is the Wildtrak model. It has a lot of tech crammed into not only the engine and its components, but also into the interior, which we'll get to very, very shortly. But comparing the two, compared to the older Land Cruiser to this particular Ford Ranger, is, as you can see, the engine bay is very clean, it's very tidy, it's very neat. So it looks good, but there are also the downsides of that, which is things are a lot harder to get to. So then the knock-on effect is the amount of time it takes to repair a part or to access something within the engine bay. It is a little bit more trickier, so that ultimately that will affect repair costs down the line. Now, as technology has advanced, which is incredible to see, that a lot of the engines are becoming a lot smaller, a lot more compact, a lot lighter, and they still offer, if not better, performance attributes compared to the older models or older vehicles within the sort of 4x4 industry. So the technology and the mechanics has come a long way, but the downsides to bear in mind, there is a lot of electronics and software to keep your eye on. So with a lot of electronics and software, as you can imagine, over time computers do not last forever. They're always subject to temperature changes, glitches, software problems. So those are things that you need to bear in mind by buying a new vehicle. Is just staying on top of obviously the maintenance of the vehicle, especially the electronics. They're very, very sensitive. They monitor emissions and the engine and various other components within the vehicle. So that is one thing to keep in mind. But overall, not really had major problems with this particular motor. I have made a video on the review of this Ford Ranger, which I'll link in the video, so have a look at that if you're more interested, and we dive deep into what I've experienced with this particular vehicle. But let's move over to the Land Cruiser and compare that engine bay. So the Land Cruiser's engine bay. Now, working on the Ranger and now working on this, it is an absolute breath of fresh air. There's heaps of room, there's heaps of space. I don't really have accessibility problems. The only issue that I've found with the Land Cruiser is the higher it goes. Obviously, I find myself literally climbing into the engine bay to get in, but that's my own doing by increasing the height of the truck. But more importantly, looking at the engine itself and all the components, they are simple. It's very heavily reliant on mechanical means. There are no electronics apart from relays and fuses and links that will power the obvious things such as lights and fans and the electrical components. There is no tech in these motors, which does put my mind to rest. I'm not as nervous on off-road trips as I was in the Ranger. I'd always be sort of alert or aware of what's going on. So with something like this, it is more durable. I find this vehicle way more durable, more reliable compared to the newer vehicles, as this has basically proven itself time and time again. So those are the items that I've looked at, and this is why I've invested the time and the money into something like the Land Cruiser 80 series. It is an absolute pleasure to work on. The one thing that you do need to remember is the accessibility of parts. yes, parts are still available for the Land Cruiser 80 series. However, prices are starting to go up due to the sheer demand of parts. It is a very, very popular vehicle, so right now we're okay. There is a great deal of parts out there, but if you find yourself in Europe somewhere where there are not a lot of basically the off-road market is not as big, such as Africa, Australia, the US, you will find yourself going further afield to try and get parts for the vehicle. There are dealers here in the UK that do specialize in these parts, which is I'm very, very thankful for. They've really helped the restoration of this 80 series. But just keep that in mind, the parts are starting to go up in price, whereas the newer vehicles, with the sheer demand and the popularity of the new vehicles, their prices tend to be more sort of regulated and a lot cheaper compared to the components here. But ultimately, between the two vehicles, I found that the parts are less needed on the older vehicles, as how they built them in the past. The quality was there. Things are not built as well now as what they were back then. So that is one thing to bear in mind. So comparing the interiors of new versus old, as you can imagine, things have progressed relatively well in many aspects. So things such as electric seats with many different sort of settings and ways the driver can become comfortable behind the wheel. In terms of overall comfort, it is very, very comfortable in newer vehicles. I'm not saying that the older vehicles have not as comfortable, but they have things that are different. In terms of newer vehicles, there's a lot more technology crammed into a very confined space. You have lots of different things that you can use, such as obviously the radio, you've got DAB, you've got Bluetooth, you've got CD player, you've got Apple CarPlay, you've got all that. You have loads of sockets, there's 12-volt sockets, your CD sockets, your USBs. Overall, there is lots of things for you to use in the newer vehicles. Loads of different settings and features in the dashboard, which is quite nice for the driver. All the different things that the driver can maintain and keep his eye on during trips and all that kind of thing. The overall feel is very, very nice. The only thing that I have found with the newer vehicles, you do feel slightly more enclosed. I think that's due to a lot of the safety features that have obviously come on a long way with a lot of the airbags. A lot of things have to be put in certain places, so that kind of closes in the cabin ever so slightly. But overall, really, really nice quality, especially if you go for these sort of the top spec vehicles. You do get a lot of luxurious things, such as sort of like with the Wildtrak is like a leather sort of dash cover. There is a lot more luxurious. Seats are really, really nice in the Wildtrak model. Really nice interior, and a very, very good on obviously the back seat as well for the kiddies. Overall, interior is really, really good in newer vehicles, especially the Wildtrak, the Ford. I have seen the Hiluxes. They are not as luxurious, or what I found personally. There are other models such as the D-Maxes, and they do come out obviously with leathers, but they don't feel the same when obviously jumping behind the wheel of a Ranger. I'm just being more sort of specific on models, so it depends on you personally. But new vehicles have loads more tech, loads more things that are on offer. You can add things such as throttle controllers that manipulates obviously the throttle response. That is a separate video, I'll show you that. And there are accessories you can obviously put in to the newer vehicles, which you can bolt onto and monitor things that what the vehicle is doing or what you've installed in the vehicle as well. So let's go have a look at the Land Cruiser. Now, looking at the older vehicles, now specifically with the Land Cruiser, it's simple. Chairs are mechanical, easy to operate. Utilitarian comes to mind. Things are simple, They're just and quite easy to find, whereas obviously newer vehicles, they're hidden within electronic interfaces such as the radios. You have to dive in there to dive into sort of changing the radio, or if you're going to Bluetooth, you're messing around with items. With something as old as the Land Cruiser, it's there. And if it's not there, you don't have it. It's that, as simple as that. It's black or it's white. If you don't have any gauges on your dashboard, then you can add more gauges, be it mechanical, or you can get a sort of electronic device. I haven't particularly looked into that personally. I've mainly seen sort of the pillar pods that have your EGT and your boost gauges. Those are something that I am quite interested in the near future. But overall, interior wise, I feel that the Land Cruiser, this particular model, is a lot more spacious. You do have a wider field of view. I think mainly due to the fact that this vehicle has 0 airbags. So there's no airbags in this vehicle whatsoever, which is compared to newer vehicles, it does kind of like worry you a little bit, but I guess it makes you more aware on the road. There is a lot of space in the older vehicles to add accessories or buttons, switches for accessories that you'd like to use, such as compressors, accessory lights, all those kind of things. And yeah, it doesn't feel as luxurious. It feels more utilitarian than anything else, but the basics are there. It is not, in terms of comfort, it's not as luxurious as newer vehicles, but I suppose you get what you pay for. But in terms of, if it's there, you've got it. If it's not, you don't. And generally speaking, everything just works on this vehicle, and they are simple to understand. It's easy, and it's exactly that. It's very, very simple. Parts and accessories for both vehicles. Now, luckily, both vehicles that we have here are quite popular. Now, they still have their pros and cons though. So the Ford Ranger, there is a huge array of different accessories available for the Ford Ranger and other vehicles such as Hiluxes, D-Maxes, and whatnot. So that is quite nice. Here in obviously the UK and Europe. If you find yourself obviously elsewhere, such as Africa, Australia, and the US, you guys are spoiled for choice for both vehicles. There is a huge market, but more importantly for you guys here in the UK and Europe, you will be limited to choice with a vehicle such as the age of the Land Cruiser 80 series. You still have a selection of parts, but if you want things such as tire carriers, rock sliders, winch bumpers, draw systems, those kind of things, and that's you either have to get them fabricated, get them imported, or you use your own ingenuity and creativity, which I've enjoyed throughout the process of restoring this vehicle, and also working on that one, fabricating stainless steel snorkels, bumpers. We've got a lot more planned for this one coming up in the future, such as the draw systems. We've got rock sliders, we've got wheel carriers, we've got a whole new front end being fabricated as well. So the entirety of this vehicle will change, but in terms of the parts available for this vehicle, for the older vehicle, slightly more limited than the Ford Ranger. In terms of parts for mechanical means of the vehicles, popular, not as popular, so you'll have a lot more parts available and a lot cheaper. This is going to be a little bit more expensive and slightly more difficult to find due to the sheer age of this vehicle. So those are the things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to parts and accessories. Hey buddy, how you doing? I don't suppose you've got any of those spare parts, the electronics? Looks like my flux capacitor is gone. Yeah, I'm in a spot of bother, man. I'm not sure what to do. Yeah, I reckon I'm just gonna have to get a Land Cruiser, bud. Yeah. Not Land Cruiser biased by any means.
If I'm not back in 5 minutes, just wait longer.